Why? Okay, cool. So this is Sausage Sports Club Weekly Update. I do this every week for 4 reasons. One is I think it's useful for new developers or students or people trying to get into commercial development to see what the process is to make a commercial indie game, what kind of decisions you make, how you feel about it over time, and just seeing week to week progress is, I think, validating, and like that it takes a long time, and that a lot of the times you're doing like small changes every week is like, I don't know, it makes me feel better when I see other people that aren't adding like a crazy new feature every week. So that's one. Two, obviously it's useful for marketing to talk about the game often and to get more content out every week and just show what is cool about the game. And you know, having me talk about it is more useful than like maybe a screenshot or something, because I can like talk about why it's cool and interesting in ways that a screenshot might not be able to. Three is like a personal reason for me. I want to be able to look back on my design process and see how I made games in 5 or 10 years. So I like this for that reason. Just having like a YouTube channel of really too much to watch even stuff, but I can like skip between them and see how the game was made and see how I was feeling any individual week, and that's useful. And I think will be interesting to look back on later in my career or whatever. And then the fourth reason, which I discovered in the process of doing this series, is sometimes people will come into chat and tell me cool ways of doing a thing that's faster or more efficient, or just a better way of doing stuff. So it's been really useful and cool that people come by. So that's why I do it. Getting right into it this week, like last week was a lot of bug fixes where I'm just fixing stuff, trying to like get the game ready for Switch lot check or certification, if you've heard that term. I think it's getting really close now. I just submitted again today another build or whatever. I think it's somewhat likely that I'll get a few fails again, and then I'll fix those. And there's still like little things that I want to change before it's out. Like I want the overworld to run better on Switch. Right now it's still below 30, depending on some things. Like it's usually between 20 and 40 right now, and I would like to get it up to a minimum of 30. And then the arenas are more like between 40 and 60. So even with 8 players, like the game still runs better than 30. So so this week I did bug fixing and a little bit of optimization. I want to talk about optimization first because bug fixing is a long list, and usually by the end of it I'm like winded, and I feel like optimization is requires more thoughtfulness and explaining than bug fixes, because it's maybe non-obvious sometimes. So I'll just go into that. And as a little preface, I guess, the reason that the scene looks fucked up here, this path and these rocks being fucked up specifically, is because I have been jumping between my laptop and this computer, and my laptop is on like the next patch revision of Unity, and there's like, for whatever reason, every single update to Unity like breaks light maps, which or I should say they change a little bit of the light map baking process, which breaks some things sometimes, and for whatever reason the rocks are that. And I don't know why the path, I don't know how to explain the path, but between this version and the next version, like if I commit the path on the next version, it breaks on this version, or if I commit it on this version, it breaks on the next version. So that's why that stuff's messed up. I might get sick of looking at it and fix the path at least, but for now I'm just gonna, whoops. Got my on-brand background there. Let me get my windows back. Okay, cool. Hey Domino, welcome. Okay, so running through optimization stuff. Like I mentioned, my big concern right now is not the arenas anymore. They all work great, even with 8 players. All of the arenas are above, are like 45 plus FPS, and that feels pretty good to me. So I'm not, for now at least, I'm not going to worry about them anymore. I might do like a post-launch patch if I realize some like big optimization things, but we'll see. So for the overworld, specifically in adventure mode, when there are like NPCs all over the place, which are just more characters, and characters are the biggest, I would say, the biggest source in the game of how should I explain this? Like CPU time. Generally, it's like a mix of physics and like my C# code, like update code that happens every update that adds to the like frame time or whatever. And in adventure mode, sometimes you have like 8 additional characters that are NPCs in the world, and that could be on top of 4 player characters, and that's just like, that's a lot to run every frame. And so this week I spent some time like thinking about, okay, how can I make that less? Like, what can I do to reduce the amount of time that NPCs take up per frame? And some obvious things are in adventure mode, NPCs, until you start interacting with them or in a quest, they're locked in place, like stuck. They only exist in one spot. And so an easy thing to do for that is to run a simplified version of whatever like physics state they're in, since we know that they're not going to move. So for me, my fixed tick is same as fixed update in Unity, which means it happens at the same rate as the physics step. So every time physics gets calculated, this function runs, and that's the same. Yeah, that's all I'll explain of that. And the idea I had was, instead of like shooting rays at the ground to check for grounded, and instead of checking my input and like setting velocity and doing my very expensive handle movement function, which is just a bunch of math, like hundreds of lines of like math. I don't want to get into like the individual steps of it, but it's just like an expensive thing that I don't need to do. Let me go back. So instead of doing that, I can just skip all of it here, and I can say, if I'm kinematic and I'm not already grounded, we want to assume that we're grounded if we're in the grounded state, and especially if we're locked, we assume that we're grounded. But just to make sure our internal flag that says we're grounded, we do a check. This like, except for the first frame that you come into being locked, like this function's not going to run. And here, this is like a ray cast against everything in the scene that returns an array, and then I think we like process that array to get the nearest thing, maybe. No, we just check that it's not the player, which probably could not do. Oh, and if we don't find anything with our array, let's say we're like looking at my mic here. If we're like right here, our capsule would still be on this thing, but maybe like the straight down point wouldn't be. So, and I only do 1 ray. I know a lot of platformer games like this might do like four rays coming out in the like diagonal directions relative to your rotation. But I just do the 1 ray down and then a sphere down. So that's like a pretty expensive operation, especially as like the scene is more complex, which in the overworld it is. So let's go back. So we only do that once. We don't do it again unless we've A, been unlocked from the ground, and B, like jumped or whatever. This one's still expensive, moving the flopping sausage head. Like that's not something we can really get around, because when players stand still, like NPCs stand still, they need to like flop to like look alive, I guess. And the calculate desired look is, I think not a lot goes on in this when we're in this state, because we're passing it 0 input. But we do need to set this target rotation, which is used to like tell the player where they're supposed to be facing, and they'll like interpolate to do that. I would say that my of all the code in the game, the like character controller and related like math and like aiming stuff and flopping the head and moving around is the messiest, and it's become messy as a result of optimizing it to be as cheap as I can think to make it. And it's been really weird, because for me at least, optimization happens in waves. Like first it was like I got the Switch, and it's like, oh shit, the game runs like garbage. I need to like do all I can to get it to not be garbage with one player. So that was like one big thing. And then after that I was like, okay, now I'm gonna demo it. Now I need to get it running like good enough to demo it with a limited set of players, which was 4 on, you know, the 2 arenas I was gonna demo on or whatever. Some at the time some of them were like still too unoptimized. So there's another wave. Then I'm like, okay, let's get all the arenas up to 4 players, make that work. Then another way, you know, and continuous waves until now. And now I'm doing another wave of the overworld. And the point of me describing this is, with each of these waves, I'm coming back to it, kind of not having lived in the player controller stuff for a while, because it's like at this point it's kind of fairly mature, and coming in and changing a bunch of shit would change the metrics of the game and like change how it feels and stuff. So I try not to do that very much. But when I optimize, I come in and I don't change the functionality of it. I just change or I try not to change the functionality of it. I just change the layout of data and maybe how often I'm doing these checks, or I'm switching from, what's a good example? Oh, I'm switching from doing like setting position and rotation to doing that in one call, or maybe I have like in this block, for some reason I was setting position several times. I want to like put that into I want to cache that value and then only set it at the last possible moment, so that I don't, because setting position or setting rotation requires updating the transform root and all of its children, which is really expensive. So that's the kind of thing where like every time I do this kind of work, I'm like fucking up readability for the sake of optimization. And so my point being that this part of the game, the character controller, and the like adjacent stuff, is some of the messiest code. So it's, in looking at this, don't think I'm like, I guess don't think that this is like excellently written and laid out code, because it's not. And then B, I guess, consider that I'm close to shipping, and so the code's gonna get worse the closer to ship you are. We can move on from that. So yeah, this is the first one, so I'll move this up, that I was talking about. And like I said, I was kind of in the midst of explaining it. So all I do here is, if we haven't already made sure that we're grounded, do that. Move our flopping neck, because that's important, and then make sure that like our internal direction target value is like set here, and that's basically all that happens, because we're passing it 0 as input. And that's only if our body's kinematic, because we know that we're locked in place because we're an NPC and we aren't involved in like quest logic to move us around yet. Otherwise, we do a lot more stuff. Notably, like I mentioned, like checking if we're grounded, and doing the like move my body code, which is really complex, or checking if we're gonna jump or whatever. So this is just like an immediate, like pretty good savings on these extra 8 characters that at any given moment like aren't doing anything. Yeah. So that was relatively easy for the amount of gains it was. The next thing, which was surprisingly a big effect to me, maybe I don't want to say like how many milliseconds it gave back, because that's not really useful. Generally in optimization, it's really like specifically for your target platform, like that's where milliseconds matter. Only when you're comparing to your own metrics of like how that platform runs, like that's when milliseconds matter. So me saying I got 5 milliseconds back is like useless to you if you're not developing on Switch, not developing a physics game, you know, not bound by CPU rather than GPU. So the next thing I did, as I said, surprised that this gave me so much back, was when player characters or NPCs are off the screen, you can't see them, you know, I can freeze their necks, make them kinematic, so that they're not resolving against all the other physics objects. And that might sound like it's not, that wouldn't be a big effect, but each character has about maybe 10 or 11 physics objects in their neck. Let me actually look, because it's kind of interesting. Let's see how many exactly. And additionally, like per each character you add to the scene, all the characters have to resolve against all the other physics objects. Like the neck itself isn't, how do I explain this? Like of the 10 joints in the neck, each rigid body along the neck isn't resolving against the other rigid bodies in the neck. They're only resolving against like the body at the base and other characters' neck rigid bodies, but they are resolving like joint constraints. That's how the floppy neck happens, is like each piece. I don't know why I'm like using my hand, like you can imagine there's a sausage character here or whatever, but each joint is constrained to the joint beneath it, and that's useful for this floppy effect. But in doing physics resolution every frame to get this floppy effect, that's like a relatively expensive operation, especially when there's a chain of these 10 joints in the neck. Multiply that to 8 NPCs plus 4 characters, that's 12 times 10, so 120 kind of cascading joint chains is like a lot of work to do. So a logical solution to that is when they're off screen and you couldn't see their neck, flopping around anyway, just turn it off. Like just set them all kinematic so that the joints don't resolve. I feel like I explained that fine and we don't need to look at it. Spawning credit physics text more asynchronously. Okay, so it's been a while since I've shown the credits on stream, I think. I did a work session maybe a month ago about it. What do we do? Empty credits. This might work. Let's do something new today. New character. Spit. Cool. So this hopefully will launch me into the credit state. See what happens. Anyway, in the credits, to fit the game as being a silly physics game and being fun and goofy and all that jazz, I thought it would be really cool to make the credits like a physics oriented game. I was also inspired by the Smash Bros credits where you're like interacting with stuff the whole time. So unsurprisingly, this is like kind of a, I don't want to say complex, like it wasn't hard to do this, but it is like a lot is going on, especially later on in the credits when there's more names and stuff. Yeah. So that's the gist of the credit sequence. And this probably obviously is the initial naive way to do this is when you start the credit sequence, go through all of the text that's going to be in the entire credit sequence and convert it to be physics objects. And that's what I did at first. And obviously there was a huge stutter because this is like thousands of characters, like text characters that is. And so for a while I was ignoring that problem, and then I got to it on Switch and it was like seconds long, like seconds of waiting until all of the credits things had spawned. So I had to fix that. And let's look at the panel credits to see what I did. Okay, so when we open the credits panel, we do the scroll credits routine, which we convert physics text, which, and this is kind of like, if you're not familiar with the code, it's kind of hard to read, but basically I have in the inspector of my credits panel, I have an array of kind of like text components, I guess that's the right word for it. where I have an array of all the components I want to be converted per letter, where each letter in a string becomes a physics object, and then I have another one where each word I want to become a physics object. Mostly because when I get to the Kickstarter backers section of the credits list or whatever, that's like I'm showing, like, not at once, but I'm showing 400 words. Kind of, how do I explain this? It's not words, it's names, but the whole screen is occupied by names rather than being like a line of names as in the like special thanks and the actual like main credits. So for those, it would be a lot. There would be a lot of objects on screen at once, and they're all physics and they're all UI. So I do per word instead of per character for those. And so for each one of those, and this is probably stupid, like I could probably do this in a better way than starting a coroutine per character. Looking at this now, it's stupid. Do I want to change this right now? The reason I'm thinking this is each time you start a coroutine, that allocates garbage, and just this process of, well, I guess because it's yielding here, that's not so terrible. But it's only one frame. It's like every frame I'm starting another coroutine of like doing another one of these. And so, and then within this, for each, so to give context, like for each, the way this works is, for each word, or each entry in this array of things I want to convert per character, I start a coroutine and wait until the word is done, and what, like in each word I do one letter at a time, and after each letter I wait one frame. So it's doing one letter per frame, but each word is its own coroutine. So each, I guess it's not that bad. I don't really need to change this. It just like feels gross to do if I have like 50 texts, and that happens over the course of like 3 seconds. It feels a little bit gross to do this, but whatever. That's not my bottleneck at this point, and I'll talk about that more. But going into this, I'm using TextMesh Pro, so I had to like kind of figure out a little bit of the inner workings of TextMesh Pro. This is funny. Switch this to use object pooling or we'll die. I did. Okay, cool. So I don't need this message. Or do I? I don't know if I do a... Physics text prefab. Does this one do that? This isn't actually in my spawn, in my pool. So let me change that real quick. I have a question for chat. When I play the game, is there music happening? Because my desktop audio is set to kind of low, and I noticed on a stream last week or maybe a week before that, I was like, every time the game would start, I would be humming to the music in the game like kind of loud, and the game, you couldn't hear the game music in the stream. So I don't know if I sounded crazy, but I'm definitely like not a vocalist, so like I was off key as fuck. And because I was hearing the music, I could like kind of like harmonize my off keyness a little bit, but for the stream, I just sounded like a very bad, like I was humming very bad songs. What am I fucking showing right now? Oh yeah, okay. Object pool. Let me do jump, explosion, player, widget. Okay, do another one. I want to do fucking, doesn't really matter, like it's kind of weird. Let's do 100, fuck it. happens on the first frame of the game, it's not gonna make it that much longer. How long could it even take to instantiate an object? Like 0.001 milliseconds, then that's 1 second. Like, that's worth it. At the start of the game so that it doesn't like jigger the fuck up. Okay. What am I trying to, what was the point I was trying to make? So continuing the thought, like I had to like figure out how Text Mesh Pro creates characters and where the offset goes, because I wanted to lay out my credits like the way I would lay out any panel and not have to do any additional markup. And so when I convert it to become like this physics text thing, I just want to like spawn in prefabs of characters where they go, or of words where they go, and just have it work exactly right. Just parent them to the existing panel and switch the panel to have like 0 alpha so that it's just like in the same place. And that was like fine. I thought it was going to be harder than it was. I was glad it wasn't. A few weeks ago on stream, updating to a new version of Unity, I think, actually like fucked this up a bit so that all the characters are like mashed into one position in the, like at the start of this, all of the characters would spawn and then be at one position, like it was like 0.550 or something. So everything was overlapping and it was fucked up, and because these are all physics objects, they were just like, the profiler's going nuts. Like it was like 0.1 frames per second. And the only thing I had to change ended up being moving this line from here to like here, or you know, the other way. And the reason for this, I discovered, is that changing size delta of a rect transform apparently resets the local position now, or whatever the rect transform version of local position is. So if you update and your weird ass like text matching thing is fucked up, this is probably why. But no one else probably does this because it's weird. Okay, so I think that's enough about the credit stuff. Oh, you know what? I do want to mention, now instead of my bottleneck being like a crazy lock at spawning all of these, where I like am waiting for like a couple seconds for all these to spawn, and then it's still for a couple seconds like jittering, frame rate jittering. Now my result is because I do this all at once, and each one of these things has a script on it. Text. Does it? Am I crazy? Physics text. Because I spawn all of these things at once, I go from having like whatever the panel amount of UI widgets is, which might be like 20 panels. I go from that to having like 1,000 pretty much immediately, and rendering 1,000 separate UI pieces is, I don't know if you could tell this, a lot more expensive than rendering 20. So now my profiler says I'm GPU bound by the scene because I spawn so many at once, and I'm not doing any intelligent stuff. This is kind of weird. Add routine. The fuck? It's kind of weird code. This is also going to make it really expensive, and I'm just doing an update every frame and checking null on hundreds of these components. What I really should do is I could either disable this component until the text piece gets on screen and then enable it, which would make it so only things that have been on screen and then go off the screen are like being affected by this. But it's also like rendering, like it's doing the the thing where it has to iterate over all of them in the culling step and like see which ones are on screen, and there's just so many that it's like a long process. So I'm actually gonna take a note of this in Trello that I should like switch this. Where is my optimization? General. I can do this over here, I guess. So credits. Currently, let me do it. Every physics text widget has a component with update / null check. Every frame should only add this once on screen, or maybe have the credits panel iterate over these per frame instead. Okay. So that would be faster. It would be a pain in the ass to do it, so I might put it off a little bit more. Let's move on from credit stuff because this is getting kind of long, this section of it. 40 minutes already, fuck. Okay, I'm not gonna go too much into this one, but you can get introduced in 2017 maybe. This new function, maybe it was 5.6 that they introduced this. Set position and rotation. It's basically just a function where you can pass in a position and rotation into one function, and instead of calling on one line set, transform position equals whatever, and then on the next line transform rotation equals whatever, which incurs the cost of updating a transform twice. You can do it in one function and only incur it once, which literally halves the cost of doing a transform update, which I mentioned before. Takes like the root, like it goes up to the root of whatever object you're calling this on. So if my character was like, I think this is how it works. If my character is parented like a child of some hierarchy, and then a bunch of other characters are under that hierarchy, I think that change gets propagated upwards and then downwards across everything that's a child, which means the optimal like scene layout is to have all of the characters or all the things that get updated their position a lot should be in the root level of your scene, which is kind of annoying. Makes the hierarchy like a lot less useful if you have to have everything that moves in the root level for this optimization. But that's kind of a different thing than what I'm talking about. Yeah, this was purely an optimization of don't incur the double update. And this I did this in like dozens of places actually, and I thought I had done it before, but I guess not. OBS is telling me I have bad, what's the word, bandwidth or something. My bandwidth color is like going down to red a bit, so let me know if the stream is like fucking up badly. I'll look at that. Another one, this is like an easy, if you Google like Unity optimization, this is one of the first things that comes up. If you're optimizing garbage collection, don't ever use physics.raycast. Just raycast, use physics.raycast non-alloc, because if you don't, then it's creating, if you're using physics raycast, it's allocating a raycast hit object every time you do that, or if you're using physics raycast all, then it's allocating the array that matches the size of whatever the results are of your raycast, and that's, that allocates garbage, and that's going to lead to your game stuttering. And if you use the non-alloc version, which is literally physics.raycast non-alloc as one camel case signature or whatever, and you pass in an array that you've allocated to the max size you want results to be returned to you. Usually I do like 10 or 20 unless I'm really only looking for the first thing in it. And that function returns, so you pass as an out argument, I think, the array, and then it returns a number of hits that have been hit, so you can then instead of iterating over the size of the array that it gives you, you iterate over the num hit, or you iterate over the return int, which is the number of things you hit. And then you can look in your array for those things. Okay, I'm not even gonna go through like where I did that because it doesn't matter. And then the other kind of obvious thing that's an easy optimization is only run logic on an actor if those things are visible. Notably in the overworld, there's crabs and trash robots that have kind of expensive, relatively expensive operations running. The trash bots specifically, as they walk, they have these IK legs that, how do I explain this? They're like an orb, and they shoot raycasts towards the ground in front of them, and if their legs, which are planted to the last place they were walking, if their legs are far enough from those raycast hits, then I start a routine that like up and overs their legs to that new position. So, and this works in any direction that they're walking, so it's kind of a cool effect. I don't really want to spend time showing it because I've posted GIFs and stuff on Twitter of that. That was one of the most fun things to work on in the game. It's just like a really cool, satisfying tech art thing, and it's such like a small touch. Like most people won't ever notice that the trash bots walk around and have these like cool IK legs. But I'll know. Okay, finally we're to bug fixes, which was really the majority of my week. So I can go through this stuff, and I'll try to be faster and not just like try to explain all of these super in depth. Okay, so finale tiebreaker per character per demeanor dialogues. This is what I was working on last week in my work session, and I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but I was kind of concluding last week saying when you finish the tiebreaker at the end of the finale, spoiler, that's how it always ends with a tiebreaker. There needs to be some like actual context about who you're playing against and like what they would say if they enter a tiebreaker with you. And I didn't want to write dialogue per character because they wouldn't necessarily have been all meaningfully different for like getting into the tiebreaker. So I split that up into demeanor of characters. Like if they're confident, they would say this. If they're more nervous, they would say this. And if they're sarcastic, they would work this kind of way. Why is Bonbon the only sarcastic one? Oh, never mind. Yeah, so I did that, and then for the actual winner descriptions, like once a character or once you have won the tiebreaker, Dirk, the like newscaster character, I want him to describe the character that won in more depth, because each character is personalized and does have through getting to know them over the course of the game, you would know that they're different from another nervous character enough to like get into a bit in the win thing. So that was something I worked on. Not exactly a bug, but like it was a bug in that section of the game wasn't finished and didn't read as finished because you weren't getting detail about who won and stuff. So I'm lumping it in there. More fixes to the coin render layer. Man, I'm realizing that I probably submitted this build to Nintendo with a messed up mesh. So sometimes in the most recent patch of Unity, they I don't know what I'm saying. They like sometimes a mesh will just break. Like it's hard to explain it without a screenshot of it. Maybe I have one. A mesh just gets totally destroyed, and oh, I do have a screenshot of it. So this kind of thing happens, and this usually doesn't happen to everything. It's usually just like one mesh, but you can see the mesh is just like completely fucked up. And I noticed when I was playing, like before I submitted this build, I was going through my final list of like really bad bugs to fix, and one of them was that the coins in coin mode were this fucked up mesh. And it's a really easy fix. You just re-import the mesh, and then that goes away until somehow it's triggered again. Usually it's like I don't want to guess what it is because I don't know, but it's kind of rare and usually only affects a couple models. The trash robots actually are pretty often affected by that. So I'm gonna put this at my list of like work session stuff. Fuck, I'm gonna have to go re-upload this. I don't even know how that process works with bot check. If I need to like cancel my submission and then upload another one, because that's gonna be the first thing they hit. What am I saying? Coin on trash bot. Mesh is broken. Check switch build. Okay, so let's keep going. Coin versus water, that's just like in Tiny Tokyo, there's a river, and if a coin is, you know, in front of that river, then it needs to be in the right render layer, or the material needs to be in the right render order layer. Usually if it's transparent, it's like 3000. The Q is the number I'm talking about. And for various reasons, various materials in the game are like pushed back to like 310 or 3010, 3005, whatever. And the coin and water, for whatever reason, have been like conflicting. So I've been having to change those. Bad looking paintball. I showed this last week that the paintball just had like this weird rim lagging that for some reason I turned up too high, so I turned that way down. Camera settings reset between scene changes. There were a few issues where when entering the like between season day kind of sequence where you recap what happened and get awarded and see your like overall progress in the campaign, when jumping to that, sometimes the camera's field of view would be like weirdly zoomed out, so the little diorama of, there's like a diorama of a living room that you see in that sequence where you can see that Dirk is on a TV to kind of sell the fantasy that this is a reality TV show. Here it is. So you see this, and you're kind of in this sort of zoomed in view, and Dirk looks at the like news camera or whatever. But for whatever reason, we were loading into that and getting like this view instead of the zoomed in view, and it was just like the FOV was changed for something in the overworld, and I wasn't resetting it, so I had to reset that. And I just call the like full camera reset thing that resets all the settings to default. Next is fixing a few instances of a dynamic text not being translated. This is actually a good screen to see this. Sometimes this breaking news thing shows like adventure day X, like complete, what will happen tomorrow, but the X needs to be dynamic based on like what day of adventure mode you're on, so that it just like is sensical. And I wasn't translating that in some places, so I would be getting it, like when I would get to this part of the game, it would have like curly brace adventure day in all caps and then curly brace, and it wasn't like appropriately updating, so I had to fix that. This was another kind of common one for a long time, where when I would transition from the player select menu to the actual game, I either wasn't popping up the loading menu, or I was like not waiting long enough for the load menu to come up before I would switch scenes or like close the player select panel. So you would see the skybox as you're like loading between sequences, and that looked really like the game wasn't finished. I tweeted about this one, Bonbon's Thirsty Blinks. I updated all of the, how do I explain this? When I was working on the trash can clipping thing, where you can like jump in a trash can and your arms of your character will get clipped instead of just like jutting through the side of the trash can. Part of that process was going through all of the characters and painting vertex colors on them as like a mask of what part of my body can be clipped by a trash can, notably like arms and tail. But in the process of exporting that, not sure how this happened, but Maya flipped my skin mesh blend shapes, like the indices of my blend shape, which I don't really want to like go into that much, but basically I don't have a way in Unity to automatically detect which one's like mouth and which one's blend shape. Like the character's mouth will move or their eyes will move if they have if their mesh is like set up appropriately for those things. And I've made a blend shape for them. But the indices are the setup of blend shapes in Unity just has them in an arbitrary order, and when you're setting the blend shape value to be, it's like a slider 0 to 100. When you're setting that, you do like, the function is set blend shape index, and then you know, a value, might be a percent, might be 0 to 100. But in setting that, there's no way to like detect by name which blend shape says mouth or which one says eye, as far as I know. Let me just check that to make sure I'm not lying. Yeah, so it's just index. It's not, you can't look up a name or something. And my naming conventions in the meshes are all different anyway, so it wouldn't be useful. So anyway, when I exported all of these characters, they were all, like, all their blend shape indices are fucked up. I think almost every character had it flipped. So I went through all of them and was like, oops, I gotta move these to like grab the, and anyway, point is they were flipped, I had to fix it, and I missed Bonbon. So during dialogue, instead of moving their mouth, Bonbon was blinking their eyes, and Bonbon's character in the game is kind of like flamboyant and maybe like attention hungry or whatever, and so adding this like constant like blinking or like batting their eyelashes made Bonbon look extremely thirsty, and it was very funny for me. So I had to fix that. I mentioned this up here, dynamic text wasn't being translated. There's a few instances in quests where I do some like unusual stuff, at least for the paradigm of the game, where the player's dialogue choices affect what hat is used in like later dialogue in the quest, and it was like kind of a pain in the ass to like make the actual translation correctly like jump into the text and like show the right thing, so I had to fix that stuff. Fixes issue where interact triggers weren't closing on exit. That one's pretty weird to explain. Let me jump to the overworld for this because there's good examples. I don't need to play the game, but okay. So in Sausage, there's a bunch of things you can interact with that I pop up, like a widget, which is just like a useless term to describe UI bullshit. But I pop up this widget that's like name of thing I can interact with, and then the button you want to press or the button you want to hold to interact with the thing. So like going into the hat shop or going into the gym or going into an arena, that's a go to level interact trigger, or loading the hat cart to change your hat is, you know, the hat select widget, or hat select interact, I should say. And for some reason, there was this weird bug where if I disabled the component, if I like unchecked the box, some of these triggers would recognize that. Like if let's say I'm standing next to the hat cart and this widget is open, and then I disable the component, that would not make the widget go away, and I could still interact with it, like select it and open the hat thing. But if I was going to go into the hat shop and I was standing in front of the hat shop and that widget was up and I disabled that component, that one would disappear. I couldn't continue, whatever. And that was weird. And it turns out that my interact trigger base class, which the hat shop interact, or the go to level interact, and the hat cart, hat select interact, all inherit from this. For whatever reason, the on enable and on disable functions were not set to virtual, and in the children they weren't set to override. They were just like regular ass function, and I wasn't doing this stuff to like deselect the interact if I disable a component, and so just like arbitrarily some of the interacts would do it and some of them wouldn't. And it was just weird. Like if I had for like, what's a good example, like in go to level, let's say maybe I don't have it on disable, yeah, so in this one I don't have an on disable. So when I call the function and we go into the class and grab for that function, because there's no in this class, because there's no defined version of it, we just use the base class version of it. What did I do here? Yeah, we just use the base class version of it, and so it properly like goes away when we uncheck the box, and that's great. But in the hat select one, because there's a little more work to do to like handle this thing, yeah, I had to write this, and previously it was just, you know, one of these, so it wasn't doing that extra step that I described, and that was like a source of several bugs, because there's more triggers than I explained here, and it's, you know, it's rare that you use all of the triggers in one play session, so I just didn't notice, and I think Bryce probably logged this bug, so that was an interesting case. This was less of a bug and more of a UX problem, where in the tutorial, when you're in the gym scout, and when you finish the gym tutorial of like kicking the balls into targets and using your head to flop against punching bags, scout is then like, hey, go meet me at the hat shop, I'll show you how to use hats or whatever. I don't know what he says there, but in that moment, if you go to the next room over in the gym, there's a hat cart where you can change out your hats, and if you don't know what the hat shop is yet, you might just go over that way and then like be like, why isn't this working? This is totally a hat thing. So I got that feedback a few times, decided to hide it, and just I did it. And that's actually how I discovered, now I'm remembering, that's how I discovered the interact trigger problem. Because I first tried to just disable that component and it didn't disable it, and I was like, what the hell? So yeah, yep, that's tied into that same thing. Optional character icon to quest task widget. This one was annoying, and I'm not really happy with the result yet. I know it needs another iteration, but when you're in a quest and there's some goal for the player to do, and I don't want you to forget what that goal is, after you walk away, you've got this widget over here. This looks kind of weird because it's, you know, it dynamically like does shit in the game to make it look good. But I'll just explain. I'm not gonna like go into it much, but previously sometimes the widget would say find X character, and you had never encountered that character, and in the quest, who that character was or what they looked like wasn't described to you. So it would pop up and say find Remy. I have no fucking idea who that is, so you're just walking around like walking up to every character trying to figure out who it is, or you're bored or you're confused. So a couple people suggest that I added a widget or a icon of the character you're looking for, and that I totally agreed was super helpful. Not easy to do, because I had to like rework a lot of how this widget worked, and if I have time, I think the visual design of the widget's kind of bad, so I would like to redo it, but we'll see if that happens. Thirsty blanks I already talked about. Yeah, during scene transitions, this is probably true for most games, but especially going from a scene in the overworld or a quest or a match from a quest kind of thing, or during dialogue, if I return to the menu or return to the hub or whatever it was, there would be all these, not all of these, but rare instances of a null ref or just like a one-off error, mostly from like a coroutine that hadn't been cleaned up yet, where you just get an error when you switch back to the main menu or whatever. And there's so many scene transitions, and they're all different, and there's so many places in the game where I can just like start a scene transition at a weird moment just because I can pause at any time. And so a lot of those I had to fix in some weird way, where I like add a null check into a coroutine, where it's not ideal to do that because it happens every frame potentially. But if, as I mentioned before on the stream, on Switch, if you hit a null, like an error or a null ref in a release build on Switch, it just crashes the app. no matter how minute the issue is, or even if it doesn't break the game at all. So that's the thing. Next thing, adds preview mesh to quest locations. This one's cool. I like when I get to work on a tool, and this one was kind of a very minor eureka moment of me being annoyed with setting up these like data, setting up this data that's used by quests to like tell players where to go and stuff. Previously it was just like dots. Let's do the hub first. Previous like quest locations I've described are like used by the quest system as places that dialogue can happen, or where NPCs will spawn in and where you'll talk to NPCs and stuff. And up until this point where I added these like mesh previews, they were just these green dots. Kind of see them, green spheres. And it was weird to place these because it was hard to imagine where like a player would be, or like where they would be looking, just based on like the forward vector of the dot. And so I made this tool. Tool is like a strong word, but I added a mesh preview, and it was a little bit interesting to write because I needed to get the scout mesh to like be loaded in an on gizmo, which isn't that complicated, but it was cool. Like, it was a nice payoff of like, oh, I could just do this easy thing and it would make my workflow much better. And then yeah, I was able to kind of solve a bunch of minor quest issues by just like going over all the quest locations and make sure they were sane. And like by being able to see this at once, I can really preview like what a quest will really look like in this moment. It would be cool to also, and I'm probably not going to do this, but it'd be cool to add a camera preview to see what the camera is going to look like for each character here. Like if I click on this one, if it was to show what the camera would look like if that NPC was talking right now, that would be useful. So that was cool. And the other interesting aspect of this is wherever the player is where NPCs will look while they talk. So like if my dude's over here, they'll always try to look at the player as they're talking, because the camera kind of wants to be, if player is here and NPC is here, the camera always wants to be at like a side angle to this, looking at the NPC but trying to keep the player in shot, if that makes sense. And so being able to like I know that the NPC is going to look at the player, so like having this reflected in these gizmos is useful. And it also lets me see like, oh, if I did this as my like thing, then if I'm switching between these two NPCs, the camera is going to really like dolly a lot, and that's not, I don't know if dolly is the right word. I didn't take any film classes, but the camera's going to at least like orbit a lot, and that's, you know, I do know the 180 rule, where like in film you're not supposed to let the camera rotate more than 180 in a cut, because that it becomes confusing for the viewer. Okay, tweens camera setting overrides instead of insta snapping. This one was stupid, and I'm not sure how I didn't fix it before. But a few weeks ago I created this bug where during quest dialogues, literally every dialogue chunk, so every line, when I hit A and the next one started reading, the camera would pop a little bit to like update to where the player currently was or whatever. And really they weren't, NPC wasn't moving, it was just like them bending their head back and forth. The like NPC position that I target, which is just the middle of their neck, might be like moved a little bit, and the camera would snap to what, you know, what it thinks I wanted. And so finally looking into this, for I think it was related to another issue as well. What was the issue? I don't remember what the other issue was, but I know where this happened, so I'll just jump to this code piece. Yeah, it's right here. Previously, if I have override settings, I was just like directly forcibly setting my camera settings to match what the override setting was, which obviously is stupid because that's going to create a pop when all the rest of the camera code, which, you know, places, rotates, offsets based on the camera settings and stuff, where the camera is, if I just like change the stuff that that setup is based on in one frame, it's gonna pop, and that's obvious. But previously there was like some extra layer of indirection where the camera was like interpolating more to reach the desired settings, I guess. And once I removed that, this you know, I wasn't lerping towards override settings, I was snapping. And so that popping issue came up, and I didn't realize why until I finally like stepped through this code and like figured it out. So fix that. This one was way more useful than I expected. Quest NPC widgets get bigger if farther away to make them easier to spot. So when you're in the overworld, NPCs can be anywhere in the entire world, and the quest widgets, I'll log in for a second just to see what this looks like. NPCs have like these little letters over their head. It's either a question mark or an exclamation point. A question mark is to start a quest. Thanks WoW for establishing that paradigm fucking 12, 13 years ago. And if it's an exclamation point, then it's somebody that you need to talk to progress this quest, or like that has something to say to you, basically. Sometimes you have multiple options of who to talk to. I think also thanks WoW for establishing that paradigm. Are we gonna load? Looks like maybe. Is it gonna, you gonna do it? You gonna do it, Unity? Looks like it's trying very hard. Give it like 10 more seconds, maybe? I've been having this problem on this computer specifically. My other laptop doesn't do it. I think it might be related to the profiler being open. But whatever. Anyway, I think you can kind of imagine this. That's fine. The closer you get to a character, the more the widget shrinks, and if you're like very far away, it gets bigger to some max like scale, so that it's easier to see, and it's easy to say like, oh, there's something way out in the distance that's like where I want to be, so I know to go over there. Let's see one more time if we can get this to load. Next one. Fixes out-of-date nav mesh issues where AI would get stuck trying to take block routes. Can you do it? Can you load? Looks like yes. Okay, got that good pink round. Okay, so the NPC thing, you can see this text widget. You can see that one. If I get close, it's like fairly small on screen. Farther away I get, it gets bigger to some extent, just to make it like clearly visible at range, basically. So that's like maybe like 2.5 or 3 times bigger than the default. And it just makes a big difference. You can also see it through walls and stuff, which is important to being able to see it. Whoa, cool. Okay, the nav mesh thing I can show you also. Specifically over here, there's a quest that starts here, and then for some reason in the quest, an NPC was marked to want to fly over here, or to move over there. And NPCs have to walk, you know, to get to a target location. So what they should have done is like walk along this path, around this wall, go over here, and then get to their location, whatever. But until like a fairly recent iteration of like blocking geometry in the overworld, the ground here was not marked as like not walkable. And so they would, you know, they just walk around this rock wall. and it would look pretty weird because they just run into the water or underwater, like run over to the other side. It was silly. And let's see if the nav mesh, opening the nav mesh tab crashes Unity, as it is wont to do. But having baked it again, now you can see that there's a blocker wall here. I could show the collision, but it's not really important. Just now that that doesn't happen. Next up, adds mode label toast, fixes it showing up too often. So that line probably sounds really crazy if you haven't heard what that is before. So I will show it. This is it. This like label toast is a vocabulary I learned from working with Tom on Battle Chef Brigade. That was what they called it at wide load when you like pop in the achievement thing in. They worked on like Avengers games for mobile, and I think at the time either Game Center didn't exist or the Android version of Game Center didn't exist, so there was only achievements on one of those platforms, and so they had to manually show you your achievement in some UI label if you were on the platform that didn't have the achievement. And for whatever reason they had the paradigm of calling that a toast, like you give a toast to somebody kind of thing. So that happens when you're in adventure mode to know vaguely how far along you are. It also happens in mode select when you go into a level, and this is a paradigm I came up with for Sausage because I wanted people to play more in the levels. You have to go into the level that you're going to play in and then choose from these trophies in the 3D space to like choose your level or whatever. It's weird that the beach isn't an option here. I wonder why that is. Let's check on that. Usually there's a globe. Yeah. The fuck? Usually there's a globe right there that would let you immediately jump to another arena instead of not doing that. Ew, this sucks. This is bad, the bad code. So this line right here is checking unlocked arenas instead of the actual matching thing for this specific. I kind of have to explain this. In adventure mode, as you're progressing through adventure mode, there's 4 days. First day is tutorial, second day is jungle, third day is, day 0 is the tutorial, then day 1 is jungle, day 2 is jungle and beach, day 3 is jungle, beach, and junkyard, and then day 4 is all of them, including Hollywood. And I do this so that you have a real sense of progression as you're playing adventure mode, but when you're playing quick play, which is just like pick any arena you have unlocked and play, I don't want that progress to be strictly tied to adventure mode because some people just aren't interested in the story thing and just want to play with their friends. And there's a separate like route of unlocking those arenas if you don't play story mode. It's just like after every match there's like an unlock meter that fills up, and after maybe like 2 hours of playing, you have all of the arenas unlocked that way. And so always in quick play, you can play the stuff you've unlocked. And if you're playing adventure mode, like I want to enforce strictly that like every day you get a new section to play around in, because it is important to having the feeling of either an adventure or like a season where there's meaningful change over the course of your playthrough. So, and this issue is because in this trigger, I didn't change. I forgot to update this to match that paradigm of the adventure having a different arena unlock sequence. We jade. Get active state. This is an option Okay. Is locked. I just want this. So right here, so I'm gonna have to do some yucks here. Get unlocked arena count. Okay, so we can do if I want to do this and fuck. Allowed. That's not what I want. Arena. Allowed biomes. Dot count greater than 2. Sorry, less than 2. Or less than equal to 2. Because 2 is hub and jungle, which means you don't have another place to teleport to if you're in there from the jungle. So we do parent game object selective s. Else if this. I'll do less than 2. And even, I'll even do or this isn't more readable, but whatever, who cares? Okay, so if platform services exist, and adventure manager does exist, okay. For an adventure mode and the allowed biomes is less than 2, or, so for not an adventure mode, I don't like this. I'm gonna make this separate. Else if less than 2, we'll do the same thing here. Okay. If adventure mode, if thing, I'm gonna just do the same like type out pattern. So for adventure mode, if our allowed biomes is less than equal to 2, otherwise do that. Okay, cool. So that'll fix it. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. That's another thing that I want to make sure works. Make sure adventure arena globe is correct with only one adventure arena element. Yeah, I can show that one too. Development. This is a piece of feedback I got from a playtester that my cursor in my settings menu looked bad, looked like unfinished or like unpolished, and they were right. It was just kind of a box that matched the width and height of whatever setting it was on currently, and now it's switched it to use Unity's actual like button highlighting thing, and there's still a mistake in it on the Windows, or I should say the PC platform. That's weird. Reset that. Yeah, anyway, it was this bad looking cursor here that you can I'll show it again in a second. It's a bad looking box, and I switched it to use Unity's built-in things so it at least matched the shape of whatever thing you had selected. And the colors of that menu are still kind of weird, but it looks more polished, more finished than it did before, so. Settings. Yeah, so this is where he is now. These actually highlight. Before it was like a box around these triangles and it just looked real jank. Or like a box around the entire Slagger box. I gotta fix these. That's a bug. That's a bug. Fix highlight on VSync buttons. Really, I should just take out the VSync buttons because VSync is stupid. Either play 60 or let your computer try its best to get towards 60, in my opinion. And this one does it too. The reason that I used the cursor highlight before is because I didn't fully understand the input system in this specific way. And this is the example of why I didn't think I could do it before. The button, the current text size setting you have is highlighted in white, and the current text speed is highlighted in white. And I didn't think that it was possible to, for whatever reason, it wasn't obvious to me that you could change the default colors of a button. Let me actually jump in here for a second so you can see main page, options, content, flip, text size, row, buttons. Okay, so here's like a button component that Unity has, and there's like a normal color, highlighted color, press, disabled. I don't use pressed or disabled, I don't think. What do I do? Huh. Anyway, I didn't realize that if I just changed the normal color here, I'm on medium right now, that would change like the color that gets multiplied against the image here. So I was like, oh, I just need to set, like previously I was like, the way to set a button color is to change the image color, and that's the way to do it. But that value gets multiplied with the associated like current state of the button. So if it's highlighted, it multiplies the highlighted color with the image color. So what you really want to do is set your normal color to the color you want it to be if it's not selected, and keep the image color white. And then once it's highlighted, it'll just go to the highlighted color. This was not obvious to me at first, but once I realized it, I made that switch and it was easy. I don't really want to show this because it's not that interesting, but in the settings, or in the pause menu of the game, the background, I use when that menu opens, I use a render texture to grab what the screen is behind the UI panel, and then I apply like a blur, I don't know, a blur image effect or something to that like saved render texture, and then fade that alpha up so that it looks like I'm blurring the background, but really I'm just saving what it was and then blurring that. And that's cool for the pause menu. It looks really professional and nice. But then once I switch to the settings menu and then switch back, that blur was like snapping to 0 alpha, which was just an oversight in my routine of changing, in my coroutine of changing the of tweening in and out that pause menu. I do a bit of a weird thing where when I tween in the settings menu, the pause menu is like aware that it's not supposed to be there, so it tweens out the main content panel, but it like keeps the blur. But then once the settings menu goes away, the pause menu needs to come back, and it just like wasn't maintaining the alpha correctly. So what it was seeing was, oh, the pause menu's like off and now it's on again. Let me like do the routine of turning on the blur again. So it would like snap to 0 and then blur back in. And it just looked weird. Last thing on my list here is switching pausing to use lenses instead of an overridden function in game state. So there's, I would kind of have to explain a lot to get into it, so I'll try to keep it brief. And I've explained some aspects of this before, but Sausage runs on this idea of a stack of game states, and this is based on the architecture of Battleship Brigade, where all of the like situations you can be in the game, whether that's the pause menu or the main menu, or being in the overworld, or being in the overworld with a pause menu up, or being in the bug museum in mode select with player select open. This is all a stack of states. So like if I'm in mode select, that's a state. If I'm in the pause menu, that's a state. Or swap that out, I'm in player select, that's a state. This stack means there's like a base level, and then there can be things on top of this. So a good example of this is like mode select, pause menu, settings menu on top. And those are like states. Previously, I was using an overridden function, or a virtual function in my Sausage Sports Club base game state, where in a given frame, when I'm checking if I want to be able to pause, a game state would override that function if it wanted to be allowed to pause, and would either return true directly, or if there was some like let's say I open like the overworld, as that is loading, as like the save menu panel is up or whatever, or the loading menu panel is up, I don't want to be able to pause during that because it's like a menu and that's weird. Or there's certain cases during gameplay where it's like not really correct to pause. Like if I'm in a hat select menu, it's not really necessary for me to be able to pause because I'm like in a menu and I'm already kind of paused in a sense. Or I don't want those two menus to like collide with each other, I guess. So that for a long time it seemed like a straightforward way to do it, where like I would just override this function, and if I was in the midst of loading, I could like have a like a private, I could have a member variable of that game state that I would set to be false until I had loaded, and then set it to be true, and then in my overridden am I allowed to pause function, I could just return that flag. But it ends up being that that's not really that becomes like more state that the game state has to manage and reset when the game state exits and stuff, and I didn't really want to. And then when I'm going back in to read that function, I have to like remember what this flag is and where it's used, and it was kind of weird. And the convention in the game for this kind of like temporary setting of like whether something is allowed or not, I've been moving towards using lenses, which is this kind of like the thing that cares about whether I'm allowed to do a thing or not, manages whether I'm allowed to do the thing or not, and other systems that want to influence that need to request what they want that thing to be. So like, or whether they want that thing to be allowed or not. So in this case, anything in the game that wants to set the pause menu as allowed or not allowed gets, calls the pause menu and says, hey, this thing, like if I'm in a game state or something, says to the pause menu, like, hey, I'm this game state, like I want the pause menu to be in this, I want the pause menu to do this. And then that gets added to like a list of requests of what external systems want the pause menu to be doing. And then every time a new request gets added, we can iterate over our list of requests on the pause menu and evaluate in this moment, like what's the correct decision based on all of the requests we have. And then once that game state is done, doesn't care about what the pause menu is doing anymore, we can remove that request. We can just say to the pause menu, like, hey, something like earlier I requested some kind of, I requested for the pause menu to be some way. I don't really give a shit what their contents of that request were, but I know I requested something and I'm done with it now, so you can just clear it. So in practice, this looks like game state overworld does this. Or does it? Maybe it's play mode that does this. Mode select. Never remember how granular I get with these. Here we go. Okay, so by default, the pause menu is not allowed, and I have to send a request to allow it. And I'm not going to get into much more of what how lenses work, but it's a really flexible system because you can set the default to be whatever you want, and you don't have to use just a bool to like determine whether something is allowed or not or whatever. You can use numbers like time is a useful lens to like set the like what does Unity call it, like time scale. You can set time scale with a lens, and then every system that wants to affect time, you can average those all together or like take the min or max or whatever. And this is all allowed by the lens system that I wrote based on the idea of how it worked in BattleChef. But I didn't just like take their version. So anyway, the way this looks is I get the pause panel, I get the lens, I add a request, I create an object to hold my lens request, which has a context, which is what I was describing earlier, where I tell when I tell the pause menu that I want it to act a certain way, I tell it who's sending this request, so that later when I want to release my hold on or release my request from the pause menu, I don't need to remember the actual request I sent. I just need to tell the pause menu that I don't give a shit about it anymore. So here, this is what that looks like. So get the pause menu, get the lens, remove request with context, and just pass myself. So that's like I really like this setup because it's really removes responsibility from me as a programmer to like remember anything about my request. I just need to send this really basic thing, and then when I'm done with it, I just need to do this very simple call. It doesn't require me to like add more state to my game state. Doesn't require me to add any more code that could be fucked up. It's just literally like do this very easy, create an object which is very small because it's just a context and whatever the type is that the lens accepts. And yeah, I like that paradigm a lot. And I had to go through a bunch of places in code and like swap out, like delete this function and replace it with this lens thing. And I don't know, I think it ended up being like maybe less code. This is all of it. Like this is all the pausing, setting allowed and disallowed stuff. Yeah. So that's cool. And that's all the bug fixes that I did this week, pretty much. I left out some repetitive stuff and, stuff that's not interesting at all. So let me check in these changes. I'm gonna actually like go into the game and test this before I check it in. So let's do day 3. Or let's do day 1 to make sure that we don't see the trigger. And I'll do day 2 to make sure we do see the trigger. Started at 5. Okay, so this isn't going crazy long. It's just a little bit long. Okay, so I need to go to the bug museum. Okay, so it's not there. That's good. That's what we want. You'll notice that my Unity takes a long time to like start up and finish the play mode, I guess, to enter and exit play mode. And I have no fucking idea why, but it's so long. It's probably like 10 whole seconds. That's like the biggest barrier to my workflow right now, is that not even compiling. It takes about as long to compile as it does to just fucking start the game. It's so annoying. Okay. It's not like a load time of the level, it's just some Unity bullshit of like building and really it's probably like a way more complicated process than I'm giving them credit for, but they have to like build the game into something that can be played by the like editor player, and that's probably a fucking complicated process for the scale that this game is. Okay, so this looks right. This is day 2 now, so we have these 2 options, and I'll go to the aquarium just to make sure that it's good. Yes, yes. Cool beans. Let's try something stupid. Okay, that's fine. I'll go to the main menu, and I'll go back to development mode so our debug settings don't fuck shit up. Quick play. So now, because I only have 1 arena unlocked, now in quick play, there shouldn't be, oh boy. Am I still in adventure mode? That's interesting. It must still be in adventure mode. Yes, okay. So this isn't something that would happen in the main game. This is because I did that like weird thing just now with my like debug settings. So okay, so it's gone. That's correct. Now let's try unlocking 1 more arena just to be 100% sure. Arena 1. The aquarium. Pretty sure this is fine. What was the other problem? Aquarium. Looks good. Cool, so that's a good fix. Fixes issue where arena select wasn't properly disabled in adventure mode for and adds credit text widget to object pool. Main object pool. Work session stuff. Okay, so that's done. Cool. Okay, so real quick, I'm gonna take like a 5-minute break. I got food before this so that I could eat and like be like full before I started this, and then I got back with like 10 minutes to go before the stream, and I needed to like write notes, so I didn't eat. So I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, just like scarf down this food that I got, and then I'll be back for a work session. That'll probably be like several hours. So if you're in chat right now, just chill, and I'll be back in a few minutes. And I'll tweet again too that I'm gonna start up again. So see you in a minute. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for checking it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment.